The first blow didn't land on her. It landed on Max. A heavy wooden bat swung down with sickening force, knocking the dog onto the snow. Max yelped, a sound that was part pain, part defiance, and staggered back to his feet despite the blood staining his fur. Eliza screamed and tried to shield him, but rough hands dragged her away, throwing her against the cabin wall. The world narrowed to chaos. Boots kicking snow, the thud of fists, Max's desperate attempts to stand and protect her even as blow after blow rained down on his body. Max never stopped trying. Even when his legs shook, even when he collapsed again, he growled and crawled forward, placing himself between Eliza and the men. That loyalty, that unbreakable bond, only fueled their cruelty. They laughed louder, swinging harder, certain that no one would come. In places like that, no one ever did. But they were wrong. 100 yards away, moving silently through the snow, was a man who had seen far worse than this. His name was Daniel Carter, and long before that night, he had been trained to notice things others missed, the wrong rhythm in the air, the instinctive pull in his gut when something wasn't right. He had retired from the Navy SEALs 2 years earlier, carrying scars that didn't show and memories he rarely allowed himself to revisit. He lived alone in a small house near the forest, finding peace in isolation and routine. That scream stopped him mid-step. Daniel didn't think. He reacted. Years of training snapped back into place as his body moved before his mind caught up. He followed the sound through the trees, staying low, silent, assessing the situation with lethal calm. What he saw made his jaw tighten with controlled fury. A terrified young woman pinned against a wall. 3 men drunk on power. And a German shepherd being beaten for doing what dogs have done for thousands of years, protecting their family. Daniel didn't rush in blindly. He waited for the exact moment when the attackers were most careless, when arrogance had dulled their awareness. Snow crunched under his boots as he stepped out of the darkness, his presence sudden and undeniable. The shift in the air was immediate. The laughter stopped. One man turned, eyes widening as he realized this was not another helpless victim. What followed was swift and decisive. Daniel moved like a force of nature, every motion precise, controlled, and overwhelming. The men barely had time to react before they were disarmed, neutralized, and left face down in the snow, their confidence shattered. There was no excess violence, no anger wasted. Just action, efficient and final. Eliza slid down the wall, her legs giving out as shock caught up with her. Daniel was suddenly there, kneeling beside Max, whose chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths. The dog's eyes flickered open, cloudy with pain but still searching for Eliza. Daniel checked his injuries quickly, hands gentle despite the urgency. Max was alive, but barely. Daniel carried Max in his arms like a child, his jacket wrapped tightly around the dog's trembling body. Eliza followed in a daze, her tears silent, freezing on her cheeks as they moved toward Daniel's truck. The drive to the nearest emergency vet felt endless, the silence heavy with fear and hope fighting for dominance. Max survived the surgery. The vet said it was nothing short of a miracle. Broken ribs, internal bruising, severe trauma, but he lived. Eliza stayed by his side every second, holding his paw, whispering promises she hoped she could keep. Daniel stayed too, sitting quietly in the corner, his presence steady, grounding. In the days that followed, the story spread quietly through the town. The men were arrested. Charges were filed. Justice, slow but sure, began to take shape. Eliza learned that Daniel wasn't just a stranger who stepped in, he was a man who had once sworn to protect others at the cost of his own safety, and who still lived by that oath even after leaving the uniform behind. Max healed slowly. Each day, he grew stronger, his tail wagging a little more, his steps a little steadier. Eliza found herself healing too. The nightmares faded. The fear loosened its grip. She started smiling again, real smiles, the kind she thought she'd lost forever. Daniel became a regular part of their lives, though he never pushed his way in. He fixed things around the cabin, brought groceries, and taught Eliza how to feel safe again, not through words, but through consistency. Through showing up. Through being there when it mattered. Months later, on a clear morning with the snow finally melting into the earth, Eliza stood outside her cabin watching Max run freely across the yard. Daniel stood beside her, hands in his pockets, the weight he'd carried for years feeling just a little lighter. Saving them hadn't erased his past, but it had given his pain a purpose. It reminded him that even after war, after loss, after darkness, there was still good worth fighting for. Just before the ending, please take a moment to comment below and tell us what part of this story stayed with you the most. As the sun dipped low, casting soft light over the trees, Eliza knelt beside Max, burying her hands in his thick fur. She looked up at Daniel with gratitude too deep for words. The world had shown her its worst that night, but it had also shown her its best. The mansion seemed to shrink under the weight of his presence as he stepped forward. The guards stiffened, sensing something had shifted, something dangerous and unstoppable. The heiress turned, ready to lash out again, and saw him. For the first time, her confidence wavered. She saw not her little brother, but a man hardened by war, eyes steady, jaw clenched, carrying the quiet authority of someone who had faced death and never flinched. The dragging stopped. The hallway fell into a silence so heavy it felt like it might crack the walls. The maid lay on the floor, shaking, still shielding the puppy, bracing for more pain. But it did not come. Instead, strong hands knelt beside her, careful, respectful, lifting the weight of fear just enough for her to breathe again. The seal's presence changed everything. The power dynamic that had ruled the mansion for years fractured in an instant. His voice, when he spoke, was calm but carried the kind of finality that came from a life where orders meant survival. The heiress tried to justify herself, tried to cling to her authority, but her words sounded hollow in the face of his quiet intensity. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His disappointment was far more devastating. He helped the maid to her feet, his hands gentle despite their strength, his focus entirely on her injuries and the trembling puppy. He called for medical help, his tone leaving no room for refusal. The staff, long paralyzed by fear, sprang into action, emboldened by the sudden appearance of justice in human form. The guards, unsure now of whom they truly served, stood aside. As the maid was taken away to be treated, the puppy finally relaxing against her heartbeat, the seal turned to his sister. The hallway that had once been her kingdom now felt like a courtroom. He spoke of responsibility, of power, of how wealth without humanity was nothing but rot dressed in gold. He spoke of the world beyond the gates, where real courage was measured not by control but by compassion. Each word stripped away another layer of her arrogance, leaving behind something raw and exposed. The consequences came swiftly. The maid did not lose her job. Instead, she was offered protection, respect, and help. Her medical bills were covered. She was given time to heal. The puppy, once discarded, became a symbol of everything that had gone wrong and everything that could still be made right. The seal made sure it was safe, placed in caring hands, eventually adopted by someone who would love it fiercely. The heiress, for the first time in her life, faced something money could not erase. She faced the truth of who she had become. Her brother did not shield her from the fallout. He insisted on accountability, on change, on confronting the damage she had caused. The mansion's silence shifted, no longer heavy with fear but thick with reflection. The staff began to walk a little taller. The walls seemed less oppressive. The air, somehow, felt lighter. For the maid, recovery was slow. Bruises faded, scars remained. But something else took root alongside the pain. A sense that her kindness had mattered. That her suffering had not been invisible. That someone had seen her, not as a servant, but as a human being worthy of dignity. The puppy visited her often, a small, warm reminder that even in the darkest moments, holding on to compassion could change everything. The seal visited too, not as a hero seeking praise, but as a man making sure the right thing continued after the moment had passed. He listened more than he spoke. He made promises and kept them. And when he eventually left again, returning to a world of danger and duty, he left behind something far more powerful than fear. He left accountability. he left hope. The mansion would never be the same. And that was a good thing. Because places, like people, needed to be shaken sometimes to remember what they were meant to shelter. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness still has power even when it's punished, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel so these stories can reach more people who need them. Before the ending, we have one special request for you. Please comment below with the word kindness if you believe standing up for the helpless, no matter the cost, can change lives. Because sometimes, the smallest act of compassion can bring the strongest force of justice crashing through the doors, and in that collision, the world becomes just a little more human.